One thing everyone talks about when they travel to a country is the history of that country and the culture. But when they bring up the culture, never bring up the food. You can tell so much from a country's cuisine. You can tell whether they need a body of water. You can tell whether they have certain resources to their disposal. You can tell so much about them. You can also see what cultures have come together in the past to form this one big melting pot of a culture. And that's what makes it very special. Cuban food is very different and very similar from several different foods, but two major ones are Spanish and Chinese because of the influence that they had in the past. And that will lead to one of my main points is that Cuba is an island in the Caribbean. You can tell because of Spanish influence, and you can tell because of the tropical island influence they've got around there. It's an island in the Caribbean, so the food will include a lot of tropical fruits, including papayas and mangoes. So you'll have that sweet but spicy and salty in it. Very, very interesting. And because of the Spaniards coming in there through trade, there was pork and cattle. That's what they brought with them, which I read in the Cuban Journal. And that's formed a big part of the culture and their food in Cuba. These are not the only things that influence Cuban cuisine. There have been other influences, which is the main one I was bringing up in the last point, was Cuba was a big trade port for Spain. There have been a ton of influences from other islands, the Caribbean and Native American Tenerife food, and there was other small influences because of Spain, the southern Spaniards. They're from the southern part of Spain, and when they came through and traded, they brought the cattle and that, and so they have a small influence from the southern Spaniards and Andalusia. The Spanish influence comes from Spanish immigrants and trading ports. The Spanish brought cattle and pigs with them, which I've already brought up, and those are in a lot of foods because the Spaniards were such a big part in forming Cuba. And you can tell because because a lot of Cuban dishes include sides of black beans as a side, which I read in the Elements in the Pepe. Since major influence came from Spain, foods were very similar, but one influence that changed was from China. The Chinese influence was from workers coming to China, they were coming from China doing basically slave work. It was slave work back then, and it was for the African Americans, but that went kaput. So the Chinese came over and they were the workers, and they introduced slow roasted pork, which is called lechon asud, which I read in the Spruce Eats. And the pork is very tender, and it changed the game in a very big way. And another thing that changed the game was the rice. They started including rice in their dishes, which made it a very big impact in Cuban food. Now they include rice and black beans with everything, and you also have the lechon asado, which is the slow roasted pork. And all of these things have just formed one of the most interesting cultures if you decide to go study there. So in conclusion, now that you're educated on how much you can tell from a country by their food and their cuisine, and how their country, through their food you can tell their geography and what cultures came up to make their food, and how China had an impact making the food in similar ways you needed to prepare and stuff. So when you go on a great trip to Cuba filled with foods and have influence from other cultures, don't eat your cheeseburgers and french fries. Go ahead and eat yourself some great tropical Spanish dishes that are just a mix of cultures, and get your full experience out of the whole thing. Because without that, you're really not doing yourself any justice. So the main part was just make sure that when you're going there, don't eat your burgers and french fries. Make sure you're going to go and eat yourself some of the lechon Get yourself some of the lechon asado, the slow roasted pork with yourself with some rice and black beans. Just really enjoy yourself, and hopefully I informed y'all very well about how the food is very important in one's culture. Not just going there and living their life. If you want to live the life like they do, you have to eat the food that they do. Thank you.